you could treat me right. Way oh, oh. Boy, take a chance, will you let me ride? Way oh, oh. I could be the best thing in your life. Way oh, oh. You got me singing. Way oh. You look like a guy, you could treat me right. Way oh. Boy, take a chance, will you let me ride? Way oh.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Conservation Street. Today I'm joined by Tayla Mccurdy, I'm sure you all know. How are you doing, Tayla?
Good. Definitely just surviving. Winter's definitely upon us. Starting to wear jackets and things, moving out of khaki shorts and shirts and into long trousers and that type of thing. But yeah, it's good.
Yeah, definitely. It's better than over here. I'd rather be there than here.
I don't blame you.
Just rains all the time. Anyway, yeah, we'll get started. Did you always want to work with wildlife and in guiding, or was there anything else you wanted to pursue?
So initially I really wanted to become a vet. I suppose that was my biggest dream. And then, oh my goodness, it's very difficult to get into veterinary in South Africa. Even if you've got like the best marks, it's still quite a competitive thing. They only take a couple of students a year. And I don't know, then I just decided, then I wanted to do like equine dentistry. So basically a horse dentist is quite a specialized career. And then somehow I just kept going back to the safari industry, which is pretty much how I grew up. I grew up going on safari all the time to the Kruger National Park and private reserves with my parents, which I was really lucky. So I thought, let me go do it for a little bit and then maybe I can go back and study afterwards. Never went back to study. So here I sit.
Did you have horses when you was younger?
Yes, yeah, I'm very lucky. I grew up on a thoroughbred stud farm for quite a few years, and then I had my own horses as well. So I used to be a show jumper and sort of competed in the sport as like a competition. And then my parents are very involved in horse racing in South Africa. So horses were always pretty much in the garden.
Oh, that's pretty cool, isn't it?
Yeah.
Was it always... So was that where your passion started with animals in general?
I don't think so. I think I was really lucky and my parents are very fond of animals. So we always had unusual creatures. I mean, not unusual, but we had chickens and lots of dogs, like lots and lots of dogs and the most bizarre breeds of dogs that, you probably wouldn't, most people wouldn't have. And, I always was really lucky as a kid. I had budgies and birds and things like that. And then I just was always outside, always playing around with a spider or frogs, especially frogs, collecting tadpoles, bringing them home, watching them metamorphosize into adults and then releasing them into the garden, which my mother hated. So I suppose I've just always been very passionate about all types of wildlife, not necessarily just the animals that you'd see on safari, but pretty much anything that you'd even find in your garden. Yeah.
When did you first go on safari and have that experience?
I've got home videos that my dad shot from many years ago when I was really little. I was still in nappies, diapers, going on safari. So I've been exposed from it pretty much before I could even walk. Obviously, those memories are very faint and I can't remember most of them. But I definitely have a few flashbacks every now and then of when I was a little bit younger, a couple of years old, being in the Kruger National Park especially. So that was pretty cool. And then I haven't watched those videos for a very long time. It'd actually be quite funny to go back and look at them. Yeah. I think I was very annoying to my parents though, that were really passionate about going on safari all the time. You know what kids are like. Yeah. So it was in my blood. I didn't actually stand a chance. I feel like my parents set me up to be a safari guide.
You had to pursue that career.
Yeah, not a bad one.
Oh. Exactly. Set you up the right way, really, then, haven't they?
Oh, no, I should be thanking them here.
Yeah, definitely. How did you get into it then? So what was the pathway you took to become to guide to where you are now?
Sure. How long do we have? No, I'm joking. So pretty much after high school, during high school, I went and did some work experience on a family friends game reserve, which was awesome, about an hour and a half from where my parents lived. So I'm from a small town called Port Elizabeth in South Africa. And beautiful private game reserves just outside Port Elizabeth. And like I said, it was such a short distance. So we were fortunate to go and visit them regularly. So I went for 2 weeks, did a bit of work experience in high school, loved it. And then there was a really good training provider not too far away from this game reserve we used to visit regularly. So we inquired on how much it costs and that type of thing. So I went and did I think it was a 28-day level 1 field guide sort of course. I mean, now it's called an apprenticeship guide. The names have changed on the various guiding qualifications. Yeah. So I just went and did that. I was very lucky. I did have a foot in the door. It is quite a cutthroat industry, especially now to try and get into. You can imagine everybody wants to be a safari guide. And because my parents' friends owned this incredible game reserve called Kariga, they offered me the opportunity to go and work there if I managed to get the qualifications and do fairly well as during my training. So I did, and started working pretty soon after. And spent a couple of years on that reserve, which was nice. I moved through the different lodges and then even got to help build one of the lodges, which was spectacular. Cool. Like, that was cool. That was hard work. And then after that, my first sort of guiding stint, I moved to Zambia for a little bit, where I did my Zambian guiding license. That was a lot of fun. And then I was sort of managing a camp down in the Zambezi National Park with my partner at the time. A beautiful, super remote on the Zambezi River. And then I did a little bit of guiding as well. But then, unfortunately, sort of things happened and I thought I was in love. I followed my partner back to South Africa because he wanted to come back. But that was actually the best thing that could have happened to me, because I got to work in another camp called, another reserve, which is one of the pioneering safari companies in South Africa, called Sabi Game Reserve, and it's situated like in the base wilderness area in South Africa, which is the Sabi Sand. That's where you see you have the best leopard sightings and that type of thing. It's an open ecosystem, a private wilderness area, just pretty much just next to the Kruger National Park, which is great. So, and I worked at Earth Lodge, which is a really unique lodge. It's actually a National Geographic unique lodge of the world. So it's kind of built into the ground. Maybe you've seen some videos of elephants walking on the roof, or I mean, there was one. It's crazy. I've seen leopards trying to kill bushbuck up on those roofs. Pretty spectacular. So I was guided down there for a little bit. And then I was starting to burn out as a guide, because working in these high-end lodges, it's pretty demanding. That's something I think a lot of people don't realize, is how much time you actually spend with people and not so much the animals. You're more an entertainer as a safari guide, especially in these high-end camps. So left, didn't really have a job, and then I saw that they were Wild Earth was looking for presenters. So I thought, well, with my pity experience, I thought, let me just try. It's something I've always wanted to do. Never thought I even stood a chance. And surprisingly enough, I got asked to come for an interview. And I went up and did the interview and somehow managed to get the job. So then I started my career with Wild Earth, which was great. So basically, for those that are listening that don't know what it is, you can still watch it. It's a live safari show. And when I started with them in 2016, it was pretty much just in the Sabi Sand Game Reserve at a place called Djuma, and then we opened up and went into East Africa, went into Kenya, which was amazing to have the Mara Triangle, the Masai Mara as your playground. So then I did that for a couple of years, and then took almost a year break from working permanently, and I was doing quite a bit of freelance work where I bounced around from Zambia to Sri Lanka, back to South Africa again. Went up and down to Zambia a few times, did some private guiding for a company that I do work with called Wandering Through. And then I was looking for something a little bit more permanent, and an opportunity literally happened to come up to do some guide training with eco training. So now I'm also based and working with them, which is, so I don't know, here I sit.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, so would you say that Wild Earth was the real breakthrough that you needed?
It definitely helped, because I was reaching an audience that I never normally would have been able to reach. I mean, guiding in high-end lodges is fantastic, because you are dealing with, most of the time, very, very wealthy people. They're CEOs of big companies, or, well, you can imagine the caliber of people that you get to guide, which is awesome. But Wild Earth gave me opportunity to take people on a safari that would maybe never be able to even go out on a safari ever in their entire life for an abundance, many reasons. So that definitely helped. And one of the things we had to do with Wild Earth is we often had various series with Nat Geo Wild. So that was quite cool as well. So we got a lot of exposure by doing these live shows that were aired on Nat Geo Wild in the States. I think they're playing, the old shows are now playing like on the various Nat Geo platforms, but they were shot quite a while ago. So that definitely was a helping hand, especially with social media. And then the rest has just been hard work, eh?
Yeah, so
lots of hard work.
A massive platform to go on, isn't it, really, Nat Geo? Have you got any future on TV, do you think? Have you got anything coming up that you're going to be doing that you can tell us on?
Maybe. You never know. There's a couple of things that I'm working on the side, but I won't discuss them just yet. We'll just see if they all kick off like they're supposed to. Obviously, we've had a huge setback at the moment with the current situation in the world. But I mean, we're just waiting for travel bans to be lifted, and then I'll be out again and going to do some more filming in some exciting places. So I don't want to count the chickens before they hatch, but hopefully there'll be some good stuff. And then maybe Wild Earth and Eco Training get that partnership back up and running, and we'll be on one of the other properties soon. But I don't know, still waiting for that.
Nice to see, definitely. I'm sure everyone would like to see you back anyway.
It's a lot of fun. It's probably my favorite thing to do. I mean, I think a lot of people find it intimidating, but I don't know why. I don't really get super nervous, and I think I like to be the center of attention most of the time, so it's easy. No, I'm just joking.
So coronavirus is ruining everything else, but you might be back on Wild Earth soon. On coronavirus, round you, have you noticed any different behaviours in animals?
I think
with less people around.
Yeah, I mean, I think in areas where there aren't any vehicles driving around, I think when the guides go back to their lodges and go on safari, I think they'll notice a difference in their behavior. They might be a little bit more skittish. We used to see that a lot in the Zambezi National Park, where for almost half the year, the animals wouldn't see vehicles just because it rains so much, so the whole park closes. And it would always take a month or two of driving around and constantly visiting and seeing those animals to get them to settle down again. So I think a bit of work like that will have to be done. But also within these private wilderness areas, just if we're just talking about South Africa, they are so used to seeing cars all the time and so many vehicles. I don't know if it'll make too much of a difference. Or what is a problem with there not being many vehicles driving around is, of course, it's giving these unsavory people who like to poach animals for various reasons, whether it's for their skins, for their horns, for their tusks, or just for bushmeat, subsistence poaching. It's giving them an opportunity to really hammer these private game reserves, because even those guys, we're not anti-poaching, but we're a presence. We're driving around constantly. There's a whole bunch of us, and now that's been taken away and putting a lot of pressure, I think, on the anti-poaching teams now. So that's not
you
good.
being around is off-putting to them, isn't it? But without people being there, and then there's lack of funding now, I imagine, for anti-poaching. So anyone watching, get in your pocket and donate.
Come on safari one day next year. Don't cancel. Just postpone your trip.
Yeah, definitely. Postpone everything. Hopefully next year we'll be back to normal.
Yeah.
Have you ever found yourself in any bad situations whilst you've been out in the bush? Obviously not the animal's fault, just...
these things happen. Do you know the thing is, it's like riding a horse. You know that you run the chance of falling off or being bucked off or something like that, but you don't go out there being scared. You go out there being respectful, and you obviously don't want to fall off. So the more and more you do it, the chances are that something is going to happen. So I've definitely found myself in quite a few sticky situations, but touch wood, have managed to get out of them unscathed. Which was really good for the animal and for myself and my guests. I did have one really terrifying experience, though. I was on foot. I was on my own. It actually happened while I was working at Wild Earth, and we were doing a rehearsal for a Nat Geo TV show, and I was helping James out, and he was doing something in the tent, and he asked me if I could help him find an insect. So off I went. I just really started at Wild Earth. I went and I was very proud of myself. I found this velvet ant, which is a female wasp, actually, because she just doesn't have any wings. And so I'm very carefully carrying this thing back on my Leatherman, trying to not drop it. I'm like, I'm going to save the day. This is going to look amazing under the microscope. And it was during the peak of a drought. It was so sad. There was no food there, like for any of the animals. There's not a blade of grass. There's not even a leaf on the trees. And something made me stop. And I was so focused on carrying this insect and I didn't want to drop it. I stopped and I looked up and there was a buffalo a couple of meters in front of me. And at that same moment, this buffalo bull who was on his own, and we were literally 50 or 60 meters from the camp. So it was very open. I don't know where he came from, but he surprised me. I surprised him. We both looked at one another and he sort of snorted at me and I was like, oh, this is fun. And and then he came for me and I had nowhere to go. I had no tree to hide behind. I had no log. I had nothing. So I was like, well, I can maybe dive out of the way and at the last second, but I've also seen how quickly a buffalo can turn. And I was just like, you know what, I'm going to risk it for the biscuit. And I just ran for my life. Literally, I would have given Usain Bolt a run for his money. Like I sprinted faster than I've ever sprinted in my life. I shouted very colorful words that I won't repeat on this podcast. In the direction of where
we're open for that stuff.
You can just imagine. You can insert choice words here of when a buffalo charges you. And I basically, the poor velvet ant flew into the air. My Leatherman, I threw up and I just ran towards the tent, shouting to James and David that a buffalo was chasing me and it was about to get me. And they were like, actually, one of the owners of Wild Earth was standing watching the whole thing happen, but he couldn't do anything. He was at the final control studio looking out at me on the phone to one of the Nat Geo executives saying, I'm about to watch Tayla get trampled by a buffalo. Like, there's nothing anyone can do. And so I ran and dived into the tent and James sort of like put his arms out to comfort me and we all then turned and we basically looked at one another and this buffalo bull is now staring us down also just a few meters away from us. And we're like, oh my God, if he charges us, we're going to have to go out the back of this tent and just also leg it and get away. And he didn't, thankfully. He looked at us, he snorted, then he bucked and bronked and made it a run for the drainage line. But that day I saw my life flash before my eyes. That buffalo missed me by half a meter. I don't know how I didn't get, I don't know how his horns didn't hook me, but it obviously wasn't my time to go.
Yeah, it's good memory, I suppose, now.
That was scary. I was glad I didn't have anyone with me. I could just worry about myself.
Yeah. It's a story to tell anyway. It sounds like a movie, actually. Something you could stick it on telly. There we go.
Yeah, goodness.
Or
it was interesting.
That was recorded on YouTube. The views
it would have definitely had a few million views if that was recorded. Definitely. Although it would have just been beep, beep, beep because of the words that I was shouting. So, anyways.
Yeah. So, what was I going to say next? Oh, Sri Lanka. I know you've been to Sri Lanka. Or Sri Lanka, however you want to say it. How does that experience compared to your experience in Africa? So you've lived in Africa, so you've had probably more experience with things there, but what's it like comparing the two?
It's interesting. Obviously, I actually found a lot of cultural similarities when working in very rural parts of Africa. So, like when we were out in Kenya, going into the small villages, there were definitely quite a few similarities. The food was unbelievable. Like I think my favorite thing about Sri Lanka was the food. I miss it so much. So basically, I was based in Wilpatu National Park and then also in Yala National Park, which is, I think, Sri Lanka's most famous national park. And I spent more time in Yala than I did Wilpatu. And none of the lodges are inside the park, so it's a very different type of setup to what we have in Africa with open ecosystems. But the animals can kind of roam around wherever they like. So you get these national parks that have got very basic fencing. I mean, it doesn't really keep the animals in. And then you have these like wilderness, these management areas where elephants and you can see leopards and they all go in where people are farming. And then you typically get sort of the lodges within those sort of buffer zones, if you want to call them that. So we had lots of wildlife coming in and around the camps, but we weren't officially in the park. So I was in a camp called, just outside a town called Kataragama, and yeah, people were super friendly. It wasn't a cultural shock for me, but I would imagine somebody coming from a first world country, it would be a bit crazy. But I just think I was so used to it, exploring all these small rural towns all over Africa. So it wasn't a huge shock. It was strange being like the only woman in camp, though. Luckily I had some friends that were working at a camp nearby, so we met up every now and then, which was quite nice. But yeah, people were very friendly. The guides that I was with and were training were fantastic. They were good fun. And then of course the wildlife was pretty amazing too. Best bird sightings I've ever had in my life.
Oh, that is amazing. Are the behaviours different? Like, I imagine they are. But how different, like, because the elephant's there compared to the African elephant, what kind of things did you notice? Is there anything you noticed that was quite different?
Well, interestingly enough, animal behavior depends on the area that you're in. So like the lions in, say, the Kruger National Park might behave very differently to the lions in Chobe National Park in Botswana, or in East Africa in the Masai Mara ecosystem. So that's what's really fascinating for me, is how that animal behavior changes. So obviously with Asian and African elephants, there's quite a few physical differences in terms of their size and their diet. I was there during rainy season, so I didn't see it dry. So rainy season kind of starts November, December, January, February, March, and then it starts to dry out. So quite similar to South Africa winters and rainy seasons, where actually I am at the moment in the Limpopo province. And it was quite funny to watch the Asian elephants eat, because they, at the end of elephant's trunk, African elephants have these two little like fingertips, and then the Asian elephant only has one. And you could noticeably see, obviously if you've watched both species quite closely for long periods of time, you can see how the Asian elephants definitely struggled when they came to picking up smaller things. Obviously having those little prehensile tips, and two of them, makes it very easy for an African elephant to pick up a tiny stick. An Asian elephant wasn't able to do that. They do this interesting technique where they would like scrape the grass with their feet, and then they'd scoop it together in a pile. I never saw the grass very long in Sri Lanka. And then they would take it and sweep it up towards their front foot and like scoop it into a trunk, almost like a spoon, and then put it in their mouth, which was very interesting.
Feeding behaviours different.
Yeah, the feeding behaviours were different. And the other really, I don't know if it's a good thing, elephants don't normally have huge quantities of fruit in their diet. I mean, with the trees that fruit in Africa, it's seasonal. So, one type of marulers, exactly. I mean, elephants for a short period of time, marula season's just finished, but sort of end of January, February, March, in not all areas in South Africa have marula trees. Elephants will heavily feed on those fruits. And then there's another tree like in October called the jackalberry tree that gets fruit. So like all the sugary goodness pops up at various times of the year, but it's not, doesn't form a huge part of their diet. They mainly are grazers if there's grass available. However, then, they'll eat leaves, they'll strip bark from trees. But in Sri Lanka, around these national parks, you have all these Buddhist temples. And part of the sort of Buddhism religion
like
is
kind of thing,
very cultural. So this was fascinating to me, is that from how I understood it, is that they're constantly offering to the gods. So there's even in the Island National Park, there's a temple called the Sitalpoa Temple. Sorry if I pronounced it wrong. That's like inside the park. It's 18 kilometers or so from that small town Kataragama. So you get people going in to the national parks with their offerings that they offer to the various gods. So fruit platters, and they would often put them down on the side of the roads for the animals too, which obviously is a problem. There are big signs that say, please don't feed the wild animals. But it's in their culture, it's in their religion. If an animal, say, begs or a human asks for something, you give it to them. So you get these elephants that literally are just eating fruit and nothing else. So I thought that was quite interesting. And I wondered if there was any studies that were being done, like on the effects of having pretty much just fruit. I'm sure they substituted their diets with grass and stuff like that, but most of it was pineapples to apples to anything that you can think of fruit-wise was literally being served to them on a platter. So why would you want to eat anything else? So that was quite fascinating.
I think what would be interesting about that is how sweet, and so what effects would it have on the teeth? Because they go through a lot of sets anyway, don't they? But
yeah, they go through about 6 sets of teeth essentially. So molars are kind of wear down and push up and forward like a conveyor belt and then drop out. And that depends, like you just said, depends on their food. So fruit is typically quite soft and easy to eat in comparison to grass and leaves and bark. Especially, I would imagine, during the dry seasons in Sri Lanka and in Africa, we see elephants eating a lot of roots. They'll strip the cambium layer from the trees. They're eating sort of unfavorable vegetation rather than the nice lush green grass or new leaves and things like that. So I don't know what effect it would have on their teeth. I wonder if it would mean that they would live longer because it's soft, it's fresh fruit. I was watching them eat watermelons and things like that, and they just chomped them 2 or 3 times and then, down the hatch they went. So it didn't seem like there was as much chewing going on. But again, I'm not a scientist. It was just an observation. Yeah. And I was always with guests or we were training, and I had a limited amount of time there, so I was under pressure. So I wasn't able to sit and, make some proper observations about that. But next time, if I ever go back up there, I'll definitely have a look and kind of just see what's happening.
Yeah. What about leopards? Because obviously they have leopards there as well. Are they as habituated to people as they are in Africa? Obviously, it's certain area specific, isn't it? But
definitely. So in Yala National Park, there's a lot of vehicle traffic. It almost gives the Masai Mara during the migration period a run for its money. So leopards were habituated, but game viewing is difficult in those national parks because it's so dense. It's forest jungle type vegetation, so it doesn't take long before even an elephant completely disappears, and that happens in South Africa too. So when I had leopard sightings, they weren't necessarily for as long, and I didn't think that the quality of leopard sightings were as good as in the Sabi Sand game reserve here in South Africa, but they were still pretty impressive. And I found the species of leopard in Sri Lanka, which is bigger than the leopard that we get here, all the subspecies, here in South Africa. Their tails were so much longer. So that was really awesome. They also didn't spend as much time up in trees as they typically do here in this low-felt Greater Kruger area. There's no, they're the apex predator in terms of mammals, so there was no reason for them to have to drag carcasses up into the trees. Their only real competition were the crocodiles that they had there, and the crocodiles are nowhere near as big as the Nile crocodile either. So there were definitely quite a few differences. There was one example of a male leopard that I thought, I don't even know if our leopards in South Africa are this habituated. His name was Horak Hora, which translates to calf killer. He is notorious for catching young cows, and he popped out of the bushes. He walked straight down the road to us, and then of course everybody got the call that this famous leopard is out, and they came booking it in our direction. And I've never seen so many vehicles surround an animal in my entire life, and this cat did not care. He flicked his tail, and he basically did like the equivalent of a hair flick, and like walked down and pranced like a supermodel. He rolled around on the floor, and we were trying to keep our distance. Because we were just like, okay, I'm not a huge fan of overcrowding animals, but we're very fortunate in Africa, and typically in South Africa, we have very strict procedures and really good guide training here. There's no guiding qualifications, so hopefully there's some great companies that are trying to rectify this and help these guys understand a little bit better about, why not to overcrowd, but that's a topic for another day. And he just rolled around. I mean, at one point there was people hooting, and because they couldn't see, and they were trying to get everyone out of the way, and this leopard didn't care. He's seen it all, heard it all, and he just carried on. And eventually he got tired of the vehicles after he performed, and then he walked off the road. And I thought, my goodness, I would have run. Like it. Yeah, never seen anything like it before. So that was quite cool.
Yeah, I don't like the idea of overcrowding either. I think it's a bit, like you say, you shouldn't be acting like that. Really?
No, you shouldn't. But I can I think there's a lot of unnecessary pressure that also gets put onto guides from guests, not all guests. And I mean, again, there's quite a few of us that just don't let it get to that point where everybody wants to have the best view of an animal. And in a national park, it's very difficult to control these kinds of things. But when you have the private reserves, like we do in South Africa, we normally limit 2 or 3 vehicles to a sighting, and then you would rotate through it, which is great. So I know from just talking to some influential people in Sri Lanka that they're definitely trying to move this way, and come up with some kind of training of sorts and put it in place. And I think that's really exciting, because tourism, once again, this is all sorted. It was just about to start booming in Sri Lanka. And sadly, then they had the bombings. When was it? 2018? Was it? No, 2019, April. Yeah, it was last year. Yeah, it was sad over Easter. And then that obviously did a dip, and then this hasn't helped anybody either for tourism. So I think it's an up and coming country, and I think they're definitely going to try and work on quality of guiding in Sri Lanka. So that's an exciting venture as well.
100%, that'd be nice. Let's go on to what questions people have sent in for you. Let's see how interesting this gets. Someone asked, it's called Lucy. I think you might know her, actually. What shampoo do you use? She says.
She's a good friend of mine, Lucy.
What shampoo?
That's so funny.
Just get that out of the way.
Goodness. Mark Anthony, if you're out there, please sponsor me shampoo. No, I use a variety of different things, but I think that's probably what I spend most of my salary on every month is hair products.
Yeah.
Although it doesn't look like it at the moment, but
I thought I had to know that. That'd be fun.
She's going to be so chuffed. That's so funny.
Julia says, what season is best to do a 55-day training course of eco training?
Ooh, okay, Julia. So it kind of depends what you want out of the experience. So summer and winter time, especially where the eco training camps are situated, are very different. So in the summertime, so when rainy season sort of starts, so that can be normally from October through to we actually had late rain this year. So about April, say, it is awesome because you get all the migratory birds coming through to South Africa. So whether they've come from Europe or just northern parts of Africa, the grasses, flowers, and so sort of the botany, the flora side of things is great because it's a huge element that you need to learn as a student in training to become a field guide. So you have those opportunities because in winter, unfortunately, there's very little grass around, there's very little flowers or say leaves on the trees. A lot of them lose it, which makes it a bit challenging. Not impossible though. The game viewing is normally a lot better in the drier season. So it's up to you. Again, very different. Winter is great for game viewing. And then summer for insects and plants and frogs and all things that come with water. It's also pretty incredible. I'd actually say come during the green season because I think you're gonna learn a lot more than you. Just because there's so much more to learn to see out in the bush.
Yeah.
But it depends what you want. I think so, because it's one thing talking about a flower in a book and looking at a picture rather than looking at it and then seeing the incredible interactions, just say on one flower with whatever insects are around it and utilizing it or, whatever the story may be. So those are very important interactions within an ecosystem. And that's kind of what we try to teach students is, how to do a game drive, but not just IDing things, but actually being able to tell a story.
Yeah, so you've about entertaining guests as well, isn't it?
Definitely.
So who was it here? Sorry. Oh, I didn't put the name, but someone asked, what advice would you give to 24-year-old lady this is on changing career and becoming a field guide?
Well, firstly, 24, so young. So sometimes we get people who are coming out who are in their late 40s already, and they're going, right, I made a mistake with my career. I did what my parents want, or I did what I thought was going to make me the most money. I'm not happy, and then do career changes like that. I mean, that's a whole lifestyle change. So I don't think you're going to need too much advice at all. Just come and do it. Bring insect repellent, a hat, some good sunscreen, and a water bottle, and you'll love it. It's so much fun. But just one thing about guiding, I don't think people realize is if you are in it to interact with animals and be hands-on, that's not what you're going to get out of becoming a field guide. It's very much about the guest experience and how to deal and manage people. And then obviously your speciality comes in having knowledge in the fauna and flora in these wonderful wilderness areas. And then being able to interpret that in a way that your guests can have a fun time. The most important thing to remember is that people are on holiday. They want to have fun. They want to enjoy themselves. But every guide is different. Every guide has a different style of sort of guiding. So I'm an entertainer more than anything.
Yeah, I'm sure by becoming a guide, though, it'll open up other doors to get involved with other conservation efforts. So
well, that's exactly it.
Yeah,
you're not just stuck being a guide. You can go into so many different avenues.
Yeah, so it's a good pathway to take. And Gemma asked, I think we've covered this really, but I'll get a question in for it. Did you know, when did you know you wanted to become a field guide? So was it from a young age or?
Yeah, so pretty much from a young age. And then I think when I was just kind of leaving high school, I said, right, I think this is what you needed to do. I didn't realize how much I'd enjoy it though, because honestly, I didn't think I was a people's person when I was younger, but I was obviously young, dumb and naive. And when I started guiding, I was like, oh, hang on, I actually find this quite easy. I just found it easy to find common ground with lots of different people. But I think that's maybe because my parents dragged me along to every function and party that they went to from a young age. So I had to learn to interact
your parents
with people.
Your life. Your
they
career
did.
Towards safari guiding.
I don't. All those times sleeping under the table at restaurants and things like that while they enjoyed themselves. Yeah, my parents are also very much entertainers. So if you've got that in you and you like telling a good story, then I think guiding,
perfect.
It's a good career.
Right, there we go then. Thank you for coming on, Tayla.
Pleasure.
I really
what a
appreciate
lot of fun.
it. Yeah, it was good. It was fun. Thanks to everyone who's watched. Subscribe down below and stay tuned for the next one. Thank you very much. See you later, everyone.
Cheers.